All right, 2025 is wrapping up, so let's take the world's temperature, shall we? In this explainer, we're going to zero in on the global hotspots, the places that are really raising red flags about stability as we head into the new year.
So, have you been watching the news lately and just getting that feeling that things are, well, on edge? A little more tense, maybe more volatile than usual? Well, let me tell you, you're not imagining it. You're definitely picking up on something real. And that feeling? It's not just a hunch. Turns out, it's actually backed by some pretty solid data. But to really make sense of it all, you need a way to track and measure these tensions, right? And that's exactly what the source for today's breakdown is all about. Okay, so the tool we're using is called Crisis Watch. It's put out by the International Crisis Group. Honestly, the best way to think of it is like a global early warning system. Its whole job is to keep an eye on over 70 conflicts, spot the worrying trends, and basically sound the alarm before things get really bad. It's the tool for understanding the world's pressure points. So, what's the big takeaway from the December 2025 report? Well, it all kind of boils down to one single number: 11. That's how many different conflict situations around the globe actually got worse. And that's just in the last month. So let's break down what that really looks like on the ground. All right, first up, we're seeing a ton of pressure building up from within countries. Think of it like a pressure cooker. This isn't about outside forces or invasions. It's about internal power struggles just boiling over. And they're showing up in two main ways: full-on military coups and incredibly messy, contested elections. And this is really interesting because you can see two sides of the same coin right here. Over on one side, you've got Benin. That's a direct, physical challenge to power, a coup attempt against the president that was stopped. But then you look at the other side, and you see the instability just bubbling up through the political system itself. In Honduras, you've got a presidential election that's immediately hit with fraud allegations and protests, and in Côte d'Ivoire, the ruling party basically consolidates all its power because a major opposition party just boycotted the election entirely. So you see, two very different paths, the coup and the ballot box, but they both lead to some seriously dangerous instability. But here's the thing about these internal problems: they almost never stay put. They don't respect borders. And that brings us to our next big theme, the domino effect. This is where a crisis in one country starts to spill over, to bleed into its neighbors. And before you know it, you've got a much bigger regional fire on your hands. This is a perfect example of that chain reaction. Just look at what's happening in Africa's Great Lakes region. So, step 1. M23 rebels capture a really strategic town in the DRC, right on the border with Burundi. What happens next? Step 2. Burundi slams its border shut and starts accusing Rwanda of planning attacks. And then, step 3, this is the human cost. A staggering 84,000 people have to flee the fighting, pouring into Burundi and creating this massive humanitarian crisis. It's incredible, right? One single military move sets off diplomatic chaos and a huge refugee emergency. And believe me, this isn't a one-off. We're seeing the exact same dangerous pattern play out with the terrible war in Sudan. It's just not Sudan's problem anymore. When paramilitary forces took over the Heglig oil fields, which are right there on the border, they put a chokehold on the oil exports that are, and I mean this literally, the lifeblood of South Sudan's entire economy. So just like that, one country's civil war becomes its neighbor's economic catastrophe.
Okay, so let's pull the camera back for a second. Let's zoom out. Because none of these regional fights are happening in a vacuum. They're all pieces on a much, much bigger global chessboard. And the major world powers? They're making moves. Sometimes it's direct intervention. Other times, it's just strategically placing their pieces on the board. Let's start with the United States. This December, the U.S. took direct military action in West Africa. We're talking airstrikes against Islamic State positions in Nigeria. This wasn't just a strongly worded letter, This was a kinetic strike. It's clear, direct involvement in a regional security crisis. And then you have China. Tensions around Taiwan shot through the roof after the U.S. approved a big arms sale to Taipei. And how did Beijing respond? By staging its biggest ever military drills, completely encircling the island. It's a textbook action-reaction scenario, but it's being played out with real warships and fighter jets on that global chessboard. And you can't forget Russia's move in Eastern Europe. Moscow sent an advanced nuclear-capable missile system to its ally, Belarus. And get this, it's not just parked there for show. It's been put on active combat alert. A move like that completely changes the security math for everyone on NATO's eastern border. Okay, so
We've looked at crises blowing up from the inside, we've seen how they spill across borders, and we've watched the big global powers make their moves. So, what happens when you pull all those threads together? What does this snapshot of December 2025 really tell us about what's coming next? It really comes down to three big connected ideas. First, the spark that lights the fire is often internal. It's leadership crises, it's bad elections. Second, those sparks don't stay put. They leap across borders and start those regional domino effects we talked about. And third, the big global powers are not just spectators. They are on the field, they are active players shaping the outcome of the game. So when you put it all together, the internal politics, the regional spillovers, the great power competition, it really leaves us with one huge critical question. In a world where every crisis seems to be tangled up with 10 others, are we just looking at a few temporary flare-ups? Or is this constant state of chaos and fragmentation actually becoming our new normal?